The hospital corridor is silent except for the click of Simone Carter's heels against polished floors. She's here for a charity gala walkthrough, nothing more. Then she rounds the corner and freezes. Alexander Whitmore sits in a wheelchair by the window. The billionaire who shattered her heart 8 years ago. The man who never returned her call when she told him she was pregnant. The father who doesn't know his son exists. Before Simone can move, before she can breathe, a small voice cuts through the silence. "Mommy, is that my daddy?" 7-year-old Elijah pulls away from her grip and walks straight toward the man in the wheelchair. His blue eyes, so much like the stranger's, are locked on Alexander's face. "Are you Alexander Whitmore?" the boy asks. "My mom has a picture of you in her drawer." Alexander's head turns slowly. His piercing blue eyes find Simone's across the distance. 8 years of silence. 8 years of lies. 8 years of a child raised alone. And one question that changes everything. Is he mine? Simone's breath catches. The truth she's protected for 8 years stands 3 feet from the man who abandoned them. But what Alexander doesn't know is that he never abandoned them at all. Someone made sure he never got that call. Someone deleted that voicemail. Someone wanted them destroyed. And that someone is still watching. Welcome to Mr. Harrington Stories, where love, betrayal, and billion-dollar secrets collide in ways that will leave you breathless. Before we dive into what happens next, and trust me when I say you are absolutely not prepared for where this story goes, I want to speak a blessing over your week. May unexpected doors open for you in places you stopped looking. May the people who doubted you witness your success and have to swallow their own words. And may you find the courage to face whatever truth has been chasing you, no matter how painful that truth might be. If you're here right now, type present in the comments. Let me see who's rolling with the story family today. And listen, if you believe that people deserve second chances even after years of hurt, if you believe that parents should fight for their children no matter what it costs them, if you believe that the truth always deserves to come out even when it's buried under lies and manipulation, then hit that subscribe button right now. The trolls won't. But you're different. You're here for the real stories. Now, let's get back to Simone, Alexander, and the son who just changed absolutely everything. Alexander stares at the little boy standing before him, and for the first time in 6 months, something other than pain registers in his chest. The child is small for 7, but there's nothing small about his presence. He stands with his shoulders back, his chin lifted slightly, meeting Alexander's gaze with a directness that most adults in boardrooms could never manage. And those eyes. God, those eyes. They're brown instead of blue, warm instead of piercing, but the shape is unmistakable. The intensity is unmistakable. Alexander sees his own mother's eyes looking back at him, the same eyes he spent his childhood studying in family portraits. The boy has his stubborn chin too. That distinctive Whitmore jaw that every male in his family has carried for 3 generations. And there, in the child's dark curls, is the same impossible cowlick that Alexander spent his teenage years trying to tame with gel and expensive haircuts, the one that still rebels every morning no matter what he does. "What's your name?" Alexander asks, and his voice comes out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by something he can't quite identify. Hope, maybe. Or terror. Or both. "Elijah James Carter," the boy says with the careful enunciation of a child who's been taught to speak clearly to adults. "I'm 7 3/4. 7 3/4. Alexander's mind is already calculating, counting backwards, doing math that makes his heart hammer against his ribs. 8 years since Simone disappeared. 9 months of pregnancy. The timeline fits perfectly, terrifyingly, impossibly. Simone finally finds her voice, and it comes out sharp with panic. "Elijah, come here. Now." But it's too late. The moment has already happened. Alexander's gaze has shifted from the boy to the woman standing frozen in the corridor behind him, and recognition floods his features like ice water. Shock first, his eyes going wide, his mouth opening slightly. Then confusion, his brow furrowing as he tries to make sense of what he's seeing. And finally, unmistakably, old pain surfaces in his expression, the kind of pain that's been buried so deep it's become part of the foundation. Simone. Her name on his lips after 8 years sounds like a prayer and an accusation, like hope and heartbreak wrapped around each other so tightly they become inseparable. "You're here. You're actually here." Simone forces herself to meet his eyes, forces her voice to stay steady even though her hands are trembling. I'm coordinating the hospital's charity gala. I didn't know you were. She trails off, and Alexander finishes the sentence for her with a bitterness that tastes like copper in his mouth. In a wheelchair? Yeah, neither did I 6 months ago. He gestures to his legs with a sharp, angry motion. Car accident. They say it's permanent. They say a lot of things, actually. Most of them aren't particularly encouraging. The silence that follows is heavy enough to crush bones. Simone doesn't know what to say to that. What do you say to the man who broke your heart when you find him broken himself? What words exist for this moment? But Elijah, bless his 7-year-old heart, knows exactly what to say. His small hand reaches out and touches the wheelchair's armrest with the gentle curiosity of a child who hasn't learned yet that some questions are supposed to be off limits. Does it hurt? The simple question from his child, cracks something in Alexander's chest that's been frozen solid for 6 months. Maybe longer. Maybe for 8 years. Sometimes, he answers, and his voice has lost its bitter edge. Not the way you'd think, though. It's not the legs that hurt most. Elijah nods solemnly, as if he understands exactly what Alexander means, and maybe in his own 7-year-old way he does. That night, Simone can't sleep. She lies in her bed in her small Dorchester apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city through her window. Car horns. Distant sirens. The rumble of the subway that runs beneath the street 2 blocks over. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. Sounds that have nothing to do with the earthquake that just split her carefully constructed life down the middle. In the next room, Elijah is full of questions. He's supposed to be asleep, but she can hear him moving around, can hear the creak of his bed frame as he sits up, can hear his footsteps padding across the floor. Then he's in her doorway, silhouetted by the nightlight in the hallway, looking small and uncertain in his dinosaur pajamas. Mom. Come here, baby. He climbs into her bed the way he used to when he was smaller, when nightmares or thunderstorms would send him seeking the safety of her presence. Simone wraps her arms around him and smooths his curls, those beautiful dark curls that are so much softer than Alexander's, but just as stubborn about lying flat. Why didn't you ever tell me about him? Elijah asks, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Simone closes her eyes. How do you explain adult failures to a child? How do you tell your son that his father didn't know he existed because someone made sure of it? It's complicated, honey. Is he really my daddy? Yes. Why doesn't he know about me? That's the question, isn't it? That's the question that's been living in Simone's chest for 8 years, growing heavier with every birthday party where Elijah was the only child without a father present, every Father's Day craft project at school that came home unmade, every time her son asked why he didn't have a dad like the other kids. She takes a breath and lets herself remember. Lets herself go back to 8 years ago, to when she was 24 and in love and stupid enough to believe that love was enough. She'd been working as an executive assistant at Whitmore Industries for 2 years. It was a good job, a great job actually, the kind of position that looked impressive on a resume and paid well enough that she could afford her own apartment and student loan payments and still have money left over for the occasional nice dinner. She was efficient, organized, invisible in the way that good assistants are supposed to be invisible. She kept Alexander's calendar, managed his correspondence, made sure his coffee was exactly how he liked it, and never, ever crossed the invisible line between professional and personal. Until one night when they were both working late on a merger deal, surrounded by contracts and financial projections and cold takeout containers, and Alexander looked up from his laptop and really saw her for the first time. Not as his assistant. Not as staff. But as a woman. As Simone. You're brilliant, he'd said, and there was wonder in his voice. The way you organized these documents, the cross-references you made, the patterns you spotted that the lawyers missed. You're absolutely brilliant. No one had ever called her brilliant before. Competent, yes. Efficient, certainly. But brilliant? That was a word reserved for people like him, for the golden heirs with business degrees from Harvard and trust funds older than she was. I'm just doing my job, she'd said, but she was smiling, warmth spreading through her chest like sunrise. No, Alexander had insisted. This is way beyond your job description. This is exceptional. Late nights in his office turned into stolen kisses in the copy room. Corporate galas turned into whispered promises in coat check closets. He told her she was different. That she made him feel real in a world where everything else was performance and expectation. He told her about the pressure of being a Whitmore, of carrying a legacy on his shoulders since childhood, of never being allowed to be anything other than perfect. And she told him about growing up in Roxbury with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about being the first person in her family to graduate college, about imposter syndrome and code switching and the exhaustion of always having to be twice as good to get half as far. They fell in love in the spaces between professional and personal, in the moments when the rest of the world wasn't watching. It was secret and intense and probably doomed from the start, but God, it felt real. It felt like the realest thing either of them had ever experienced. Then she got pregnant. And everything changed. She found out on a Tuesday morning, standing in her bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines that rewrote her entire future in seconds. Terror and joy fought for dominance in her chest. They'd been careful mostly, but careful isn't the same as perfect, and apparently one night of carelessness was all it took. She called him that same day. Left him a voicemail because he was in back-to-back meetings and she couldn't wait, couldn't carry this secret alone for even a few more hours. Her voice shook as she told him she was pregnant, that they needed to talk, that she knew this wasn't the plan but they'd figure it out together. He never called back. She waited 3 days, her phone always within reach, jumping every time it rang. But Alexander never returned her call. On the 4th day, his mother showed up at her apartment. Catherine Whitmore was everything Simone wasn't. Elegant, refined, draped in clothes that cost more than Simone made in 3 months. She stood in Simone's tiny living room like a queen surveying a peasant's hovel, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes cataloging every detail, every sign of Simone's modest circumstances. "Miss Carter," Catherine had said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from generations of wealth and social power. "Let's not waste each other's time. My son has a future ahead of him. A future that doesn't include complications." She'd pulled out a check. $50,000, made out to Simone Carter, the signature already in place. "This is generous," Catherine continued. "More than generous, actually. Take it. Disappear. Handle your situation however you see fit. But understand that if you attempt to contact Alexander again, if you try to claim any connection to the Whitmore family, this offer will be rescinded and you'll find yourself facing legal consequences you can't begin to imagine." Simone had stared at that check, at all those zeros, at the casual cruelty of a woman who thought everything and everyone could be bought. And something hardened inside her chest, something that turned grief into steel. "No," she'd said quietly. "Excuse me." "I said no." Simone had picked up the check and torn it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces fall to her worn carpet like snow. "I don't want your money. I wanted Alexander. But clearly, he's made his choice. So you can take your check and your threats and get out of my apartment." Catherine's mask had slipped for just a second, surprise flickering across her features. But then it was back in place, smooth and cold as marble. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." After Catherine left, Simone packed everything she owned into boxes and moved across the city. She quit her job, changed her phone number, and built a new life from scratch. A life where she was just Simone Carter, single mother, event coordinator, woman who got up every morning and did what needed to be done. A life where Alexander Whitmore was just a photograph in a drawer and a complicated answer to her son's questions about his father. She believed Alexander had chosen his family's approval over their love. She believed he'd sent his mother to pay her off. She believed he'd moved on without a second thought about the assistant he'd knocked up and discarded. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that Alexander never got her voicemail. That someone had intercepted it. That someone had deleted it before he ever had a chance to hear her voice saying those 3 words that would have changed everything. "I'm pregnant, Alex." Victoria Sterling had returned from London that same week. Beautiful, blonde, connected, ruthless Victoria, who'd known Alexander since they were children, who'd been groomed by both their families to eventually become his wife. She'd taken one look at Simone, one look at the way Alexander's face lit up when his assistant walked into the room, and understood immediately that this nobody posed a threat to her carefully constructed future. So Victoria had taken care of it. She'd accessed Alexander's phone when he left it on his desk to use the restroom. She'd listened to Simone's voicemail, her heart racing with the realization of what this meant, what opportunity had just fallen into her lap. And she deleted it with one quick tap, then cleared the deleted messages folder for good measure. Then she'd gone to Catherine Whitmore with a fabricated story about Simone's intentions, about how this gold-digging assistant was planning to trap Alexander with a baby, about how they needed to act quickly to protect him from his own naive trust. Catherine, already skeptical of her son's relationship with an employee, had been all too willing to believe Victoria's lies. The $50,000 check had been real. But the signature that had supposedly proven Simone cashed it and took the money? Forged. Victoria had set up a bank account in Simone's name, deposited the check herself using a fake ID, and then shown Alexander the transaction records as proof that Simone had sold him out for cash. Alexander had believed it. He'd been heartbroken and furious and stupidly, desperately hurt, but he believed it. Because Victoria was family friend, because his mother confirmed the story, because the evidence was right there in black and white. And Simone had believed Alexander wanted nothing to do with her or their baby. Because his mother had shown up with that check, because he never returned her call, because silence speaks louder than any words. Both of them spent 8 years believing a lie. 8 years of Alexander thinking he'd been used and discarded. 8 years of Simone raising their son alone, believing his father didn't care. 8 years of Elijah growing up without his dad. 8 years stolen by Victoria's ambition and perfectly executed manipulation. I called him, Simone whispers now into the darkness of her bedroom, her arms still wrapped around her son. I left him a voicemail telling him I was pregnant. He never called back. But even as she says it, something is shifting in her understanding. That moment in the hospital corridor, the genuine shock on Alexander's face when he'd learned about the check. The way he'd said he never knew, never got any message. The pain in his eyes that looked real because it was real. What if they'd both been played? What if someone had orchestrated their separation, had lied to them both, had spent 8 years building an empire of deception on the foundation of their broken hearts? Elijah has fallen asleep against her shoulder, his breathing deep and even. Simone holds him close and stares at the ceiling and wonders how many lives have been destroyed by Victoria Sterling's ambition. At Whitmore Industries headquarters, 30 floors above the Boston streets, Victoria Sterling stands before the board of directors in the main conference room. She's immaculate in a white power suit that probably cost $5,000, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek bun that shows off the diamond earrings glittering at her ears. Her smile is perfectly calibrated, concerned but confident, the smile of someone who knows exactly what she's doing and has planned every move 3 steps ahead. Gentlemen, she says, though there are 2 women on the board who she acknowledges with a slight nod. Thank you for making time for this emergency session. I know you're all busy, but the matter we need to discuss can't wait any longer. The board members shift in their leather chairs. They're uncomfortable, and they should be. What Victoria is proposing goes against everything Alexander Whitmore built, against the man who turned his father's modest tech company into a $3 billion empire in just 10 years. Alexander's condition has made it impossible for him to fulfill his duties as CEO, Victoria continues, her voice dripping with false concern that sounds genuine if you don't know her well enough to hear the calculation underneath. The doctors have recommended he focus entirely on his recovery. His physical therapy alone takes 4 hours a day. His pain management requires medications that affect cognitive function. For the good of the company, for the good of his legacy, I'm proposing we make my interim CEO position permanent. Marcus Chun, the CFO and one of Alexander's few remaining allies, leans forward in his chair. He's 45, sharp as a blade, and he's known Alexander for 12 years. He was there when Alexander rebuilt the company's financial infrastructure, when he navigated the 2008 recession without laying off a single employee, when he turned Whitmore Industries into something his grandfather couldn't have imagined. Does Alexander know you're proposing this? Marcus asks, his tone carefully neutral. Victoria's smile doesn't waver. She's been expecting this question, has prepared for it, has her answer ready. Alexander isn't in a position to make sound decisions right now, which is exactly why this board exists. We have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders, to the employees, to the future of this company. Alexander would want us to do what's best for Whitmore Industries, even if that means making difficult decisions on his behalf. The board members exchange glances. Some look convinced. Others look troubled. But Victoria has been working on them for 6 months, ever since Alexander's accident gave her the opening she'd been waiting for. She's been patient, strategic, positioning herself as the only person capable of keeping the company stable during this crisis. What the board doesn't know is that Victoria has been systematically removing Alexander's supporters from key positions, replacing them with people loyal to her. What they don't know is that she's been manipulating financial reports to make Alexander's pre-accident decisions look reckless, to make it seem like his judgment was already impaired before the crash. What they don't know is that she's been positioning herself to inherit everything Alexander built, piece by piece, while he's been too buried in physical therapy and depression to notice. She's been planning this takeover for 8 years. Ever since the day she realized that Alexander was serious about Simone Carter, that he was actually considering a future with his nobody assistant instead of accepting the path that had been laid out for him since childhood. Ever since the day she understood that if she wanted to be Mrs. Alexander Whitmore, if she wanted access to the Whitmore fortune and power and influence, she was going to have to eliminate the competition. The pregnancy had been unexpected but manageable. Actually, it had been perfect. Nothing like an illegitimate baby to make a family close ranks, to make them see that their golden heir needed protection from his own poor judgment. She'd intercepted the voicemail, fed Catherine just enough truth mixed with lies to get her on board, and watched as the Whitmores did exactly what she predicted. They'd made Simone disappear. And Alexander, heartbroken and betrayed, had eventually turned to Victoria for comfort. She'd been patient, supportive, understanding. She hadn't pushed, hadn't demanded. She'd just been there, and slowly, over months and then years, he'd started to see her as more than just a family friend. They'd gotten engaged 2 years ago, a society wedding already planned for next spring. Then came the car accident. The accident that wasn't actually an accident, though only Victoria knows that truth. The accident that put Alexander in a wheelchair and gave her the perfect opportunity to finally take what should have been hers all along. "I move we vote," one of the board members says, and Victoria hides her triumph behind another concerned smile. But Marcus Chin isn't done yet. "I'd like to propose we table this discussion until we can speak with Alexander directly. He deserves to be part of this conversation." "Marcus," Victoria says, her voice soft but firm. "Alexander tried to kill himself 3 months ago." The room goes silent. This is new information Victoria has been saving for exactly this moment. "He drove his wheelchair to the edge of his penthouse balcony," she continues, and there's real emotion in her voice now because this part is actually true. "He sat there for 2 hours in the middle of the night, staring down at the street 30 stories below. If his physical therapist hadn't arrived early for their morning session, if she hadn't talked him back from that ledge." Victoria lets the sentence hang, lets them imagine the rest. Marcus Chen's face has gone pale. He didn't know. Alexander never told him. "So when you ask if Alexander is capable of making sound decisions right now," Victoria says quietly, "I have to tell you that I'm not sure he is. I love him. I want him to recover. But I can't let my personal feelings compromise what's best for this company. None of us can." The vote, when it comes, is 7-4 in favor of removing Alexander as CEO and installing Victoria Sterling permanently. Marcus votes against it, along with 3 other board members who remember what Alexander accomplished. But it's not enough. Victoria remains composed during the vote, professional and appropriate. But inside, she's celebrating. She's won. After 8 years of careful planning, of strategic manipulation, of patience and calculation, she's finally gotten everything she wanted. The company is hers. The power is hers. And Alexander, broken and depressed in his penthouse prison, is too defeated to stop her. What Victoria doesn't know is that 2 days after that hospital corridor encounter, Elijah Carter does something that will change everything. He writes a letter. The boy sits at his small desk in his bedroom, surrounded by posters of planets and robots, his tongue sticking out slightly the way it does when he's concentrating hard. He has lined paper from school and a blue pen his teacher gave him for winning the spelling bee, and he writes in his careful, slightly crooked 7-year-old handwriting. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, my name is Elijah James Carter, and I think you might be my dad. I'm 7 3/4 years old. My birthday is March 15th. My mom says I'm smart and stubborn. I like robots and basketball and reading about space. I saw how my mom looked at you at the hospital. She looked sad and scared and something else I don't have a word for yet. She keeps a picture of you in her drawer. She thinks I don't know, but I've seen it. Sometimes late at night when she thinks I'm asleep, I can hear her crying in her room, and I think maybe she's looking at that picture. If you are my dad, I want to know you. Even if you're in a wheelchair. My friend Marcus's dad is in a wheelchair, and he's still the best dad ever. He coaches our basketball team from the sideline, and he never misses a game. If you're not my dad, that's okay too. But I think you are. I have your eyes. Not the color, but the shape. And I have this thing my mom calls the Whitmore stubborn, and she always looks sad when she says it. Your maybe son, Elijah. He folds the letter carefully and puts it in an envelope he took from the kitchen drawer. He finds Alexander's address on the internet because Whitmore Industries is famous in Boston and their headquarters address is listed on the website. He doesn't have money for a stamp, but he figures out that he can walk to the post office 3 blocks from school and mail it there, and he does exactly that the next afternoon, telling his after-school program counselor that he needs to use the bathroom and then sneaking out for 10 minutes to drop his letter in the blue mailbox on the corner. When Alexander receives that letter 3 days later, sitting in his penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, surrounded by the expensive emptiness of his life, he reads it 7 times. The first time in shock. The second time in disbelief. The 3rd through 7th times because each reading reveals something new. The careful handwriting. The heartbreaking honesty. The matter-of-fact acceptance of his wheelchair. The longing underneath every sentence. Your maybe son. Alexander sits with that letter in his lap for an hour, staring out at the water, feeling something crack open in his chest that's been frozen solid since the accident. Maybe longer. Maybe since the day Simone disappeared and he believed she'd used him. Then he picks up his phone and calls his lawyer. I need a paternity test, he says. And I need it done yesterday. The knock on Simone's apartment door comes at 8 p.m. on a Thursday. She's just finished cleaning up from dinner. Elijah is supposedly asleep, though she suspects he's actually reading under his covers with a flashlight, and she's looking forward to a glass of wine and an hour of mindless television before bed. She opens the door and her world tilts again. Alexander is there, in his wheelchair, yes, but also in a tailored charcoal suit that probably costs more than her monthly rent. His light brown hair is styled perfectly despite everything, and his blue eyes are intense in a way that makes her remember things she's tried very hard to forget. Behind him stands a man in a driver's uniform, respectful and discreet. We need to talk, Alexander says without preamble. Simone's heart is hammering so hard she's surprised it doesn't break through her ribs. Elijah is asleep. I got his letter. The world tilts. Actually tilts, like the floor has become unstable beneath her feet. He what? Your son, our son, wrote me a letter. Alexander pulls it from his jacket pocket, still folded, clearly read many times. Simone, is he mine? The question hangs in the air between them, 8 years of pain and lies and missed moments compressed into 4 simple words. Simone looks at this man she once loved, this man who's now in a wheelchair and looking at her like she holds the answer to every question he's ever asked, and she knows she can't run anymore. Can't hide anymore. Can't protect Elijah from the truth because Elijah has already decided the truth matters more than her protection. Yes, she whispers, the word barely audible. He's yours. Alexander's hands grip his wheelchair armrests so tightly his knuckles turn white. His breathing has gone shallow. His eyes are bright with something that might be tears, though he's too proud to let them fall. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you just disappear? And there it is. The question she's been dreading for 8 years. The question that has so many answers and none of them simple. I tried to tell you. The words explode out of Simone, 8 years of hurt and anger finally breaking free. I called you, Alexander. I left you a voicemail. I told you I was pregnant and we needed to talk. You never responded. Not a call, not a text, nothing. And then 3 days later your mother showed up at my apartment with a check. Alexander's face goes pale. What check? What are you talking about? The $50,000. Simone is fighting to keep her voice down, aware that Elijah's bedroom is just down the hall. Your mother came to my apartment and offered me $50,000 to disappear. She told me you wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. She said if I tried to contact you again, I'd face legal consequences. She told me to take the money and handle my situation however I saw fit. And did you? Alexander's voice is tight. Did you take it? I tore it up in her face. They stare at each other, and something is shifting in the space between them. Some understanding trying to break through 8 years of accumulated hurt. I never sent you any money, Alexander says slowly. I never knew you called. Simone, I thought you left because you got what you wanted from me. My mother told me you'd come to the estate, taken a settlement check, and said you were glad to be rid of me. The truth starts to crystallize between them, sharp and terrible and painfully clear. A truth shaped by lies and manipulation, and someone who had everything to gain from keeping them apart. Someone deleted my voicemail, Simone says, the realization washing over her like cold water. Someone lied to both of us, Alexander responds. They sit in silence for a moment, both of them processing what this means. That they were torn apart deliberately. That someone orchestrated their separation. That 8 years of pain and loneliness and single parenthood were built on a foundation of calculated deception. Victoria, Alexander says finally, and his voice is cold enough to freeze fire. It had to be Victoria. Simone nods slowly, remembering the blonde woman who appeared at Whitmore Industries right around the time everything fell apart, who was always hovering near Alexander's office, who looked at Simone like she was an insect to be crushed. They moved to Simone's small living room, Alexander maneuvering his wheelchair through her narrow doorway with practiced ease. He sits across from her, the coffee table between them like a demilitarized zone, and they finally have the conversation they should have had 8 years ago. I need a paternity test, Alexander says. Not because I don't believe you. I can see myself in him, Simone. I see my eyes, my chin, the way he stands like he's ready to take on the world. But I need legal proof for what comes next. What comes next? Alexander's jaw sets with a determination Simone remembers from boardroom negotiations, from corporate battles, from the man who built $1 billion empire before he was 35. Victoria has been trying to take everything from me. My company, my legacy, my future. She's been planning this since before my accident, and now I understand why. I don't follow. You got pregnant 8 years ago. Victoria convinced me you'd left me for money, convinced my mother you were a threat, orchestrated our entire breakup. Then she positioned herself as my future wife, as the woman who understood me, who came from my world, who my family approved of. Alexander's voice is bitter. She's been playing the long game. And now she's convinced the board I'm mentally and physically unfit to run my own company. She had them vote me out 2 days ago. Simone's blood runs cold. She what? She's the new permanent CEO of Whitmore Industries. She's been systematically removing my supporters, manipulating financial reports, building a case that I'm incompetent. And if she finds out I have a son, an heir who could one day inherit everything I built. He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Simone understands perfectly what Victoria Sterling is capable of, what she's already done, what lengths she'll go to protect her position. She'd see him as a threat, Simone says quietly. She's already threatened by my potential recovery. If she discovers I have a 7-year-old son with a legitimate claim to the Whitmore fortune, a son who proves I had reasons to live that she's been hiding for 8 years. Alexander leans forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. I need to protect him, Simone. I need to protect Elijah. We both do. Simone wraps her arms around herself. I've spent 8 years protecting him from rejection, from the pain of having a father who didn't want him. Now you're telling me I need to protect him from a woman who might actually hurt him. Victoria tried to kill me. The words fall between them like stones into still water. What? My car accident wasn't an accident. Alexander's voice is flat, matter-of-fact, like he's reciting financial reports. The brake lines were tampered with. The police investigated, but couldn't prove who did it. But I know it was Victoria. She needed me out of the way, and killing me would have been cleaner than this. The wheelchair was an accident. She wanted me dead. Simone feels sick. And now she's running your company. And now she's running my company, Alexander confirms. Which means she has resources, money, influence, legal teams, security personnel. If she decides Elijah is a problem that needs to be solved, we need to stop her. Simone hears the words coming out of her mouth and can't quite believe she's saying them. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern was whether the catering company would deliver the right appetizers for the hospital gala. Now she's planning to take down a billionaire CEO who's already committed attempted murder. Are you with me? Alexander asks, and his voice has softened. I've lost 8 years with my son. I've lost my ability to walk. I've lost my company. I'm not losing anything else, Simone. I'm going to take Victoria down and get back everything she stole from us. But I can't do it alone. Simone looks at this man who broke her heart, who was broken by the same lies that destroyed her, who's now asking her to trust him again. She thinks about Elijah sleeping down the hall, about the life she's built for them, about the safety she's tried so hard to maintain. And she realizes that safety was always an illusion. Victoria Sterling has been a threat to them for 8 years. They just didn't know it. We both do, she says, reaching across the space between them. Not to touch him, not yet, but in a gesture of solidarity. We protect Elijah together. And we take down the woman who tried to destroy us. Alexander reaches back, and their hands meet halfway across the coffee table. His grip is strong despite everything, warm and solid and familiar in a way that makes Simone's heart ache. Behind them, a small voice pipes up from the hallway. I'm not asleep anymore. They both turn to find Elijah standing in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes, looking between his mother and the man in the wheelchair with an expression that's far too knowing for 7 years old. So you are my daddy? Alexander looks at his son, really looks at him, and something fundamental shifts in his expression. All the bitterness, all the corporate calculation, all the walls he's built around himself since the accident, they all crack and crumble. What's left is just a man meeting his child for the first time, a father seeing his son, and the love that floods his features is so raw and overwhelming that Simone has to look away. Yeah, Alexander says, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, buddy. I'm your daddy. Elijah crosses the living room in his bare feet and stops in front of Alexander's wheelchair. He studies his father with that same intense curiosity he showed at the hospital, and then, with the simple confidence of a child who hasn't learned yet to guard his heart, he climbs into Alexander's lap and wraps his small arms around his father's neck. Alexander holds his son for the first time, and tears finally fall down his face because some moments are too big for pride. Simone watches them through her own tears, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously, and she knows that nothing will ever be the same. Victoria Sterling has started a war. She just doesn't know it yet. But she's about to find out what happens when you threaten a Whitmore's child. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been lying to you for years? Have you ever realized that your entire life was built on a foundation of manipulation? Type betrayed in the comments if you felt that pain. And here's the real question. Should Simone trust Alexander again after 8 years of believing he abandoned them? Can love survive that kind of betrayal, that kind of hurt? Let me know what you think, because this story is just getting started, and the war between Alexander, Simone, and Victoria Sterling is about to explode in ways none of them are prepared for. Behind them, a small voice pipes up from the hallway. I'm not asleep anymore. They both turn to find Elijah standing in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes, looking between his mother and the man in the wheelchair with an expression that's far too knowing for 7 years old. So you are my daddy? Alexander looks at his son, really looks at him, and something fundamental shifts in his expression. All the bitterness, all the corporate calculation, all the walls he's built around himself since the accident, they all crack and crumble. What's left is just a man meeting his child for the first time, a father seeing his son, and the love that floods his features is so raw and overwhelming that Simone has to look away. Yeah, Alexander says, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, buddy. I'm your daddy. Elijah crosses the living room in his bare feet and stops in front of Alexander's wheelchair. He studies his father with that same intense curiosity he showed at the hospital, and then, with the simple confidence of a child who hasn't learned yet to guard his heart, he climbs into Alexander's lap and wraps his small arms around his father's neck. Alexander holds his son for the first time, and tears finally fall down his face because some moments are too big for pride. Simone watches them through her own tears, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously, and she knows that nothing will ever be the same. Victoria Sterling has started a war. She just doesn't know it yet. But she's about to find out what happens when you threaten a Whitmore's child. This is where we pause part 1. But trust me, what comes next will have you on the edge of your seat. If this story has grabbed you, if you felt every moment of Simone's pain and Alexander's heartbreak, if you believe in second chances and fighting for the truth no matter what it costs, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Because part 2 is coming, and Victoria Sterling's empire is about to come crashing down in ways you won't see coming. Type ready for part 2 in the comments if you want to see how this war ends. And hit that like button so I know you're invested in this family's journey. This is Mr. Harrington Stories. Part 2 drops soon. Don't miss it.